What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome or welcome back to the Lost and Found Dating Channel. Thank you for joining us on another adventure today as we talk about the three things that we always talk about. What are those three things, you might be asking you? Well, let me refresh your memory. On this channel, we talk about life, we talk about dating, and we talk about dating life. We rub those two together like peanut butter and jelly, make a nice concoction. So that's what we talk about on this channel. Hopefully, that's what you're here to hear me talk about. If you haven't already, make sure you check us out on some of our other platforms. You can find us on Instagram. You can also find us on Twitter as well. Without further, before I end this intro, can we please take a moment to acknowledge the Lost and Found Dating Channel merch? The black tee. See what we got going on here? We got these lines, and then they come together to make a nice little heart. We're finding ourselves, we're finding our heart, we're finding our happiness. Because that's what we're about on this channel. So, without further ado, let's dive in to this week's topic. All right, friends. So, in this week's topic, we're going to talk about what we view as one of the philosophies or maybe guiding principles or maybe goals of this channel. It's something that I've been thinking a lot about in how I try to make videos and make content to help people, and that is the concept of challenging you to look at unhealthy relationships through a new lens, right? Challenging you to look at the unhealthy relationship that perhaps you are in, that you recently got out of, that maybe you feel like a friend or family member or a loved one is in. Challenging you to look at that relationship in a new lens. I think a lot of times what happens and why people find themselves stuck and struggling to get out of unhealthy relationships is they have a very fixed, sort of narrow lens, a very fixed, narrow perspective on that relationship. And sometimes the way in which we look at the relationship sort of traps us and prevents us from being able to exit it or from being able to mend it, right? Sometimes the way in which we conceptualize and perceive the relationship, from that it creates the different avenues and constrains or limits the options that we have as far as what to do next. So I want you to imagine that you and I, we are together, right? Let's say you and I are together. We are comrades. We're soldiers in a war, right? Let's say you and I are sitting next to each other, right? Let's say we are snipers, right? And we're looking at a war, right? You've got one. Let's say we're sitting next to each other, right? You've got one set of binoculars, and you're looking out there. You're looking onto the battlefield, and you're seeing all the chaos and all the carnage and all the madness and all the screaming and yelling and all the gunshots, all the artillery, all just the craziness, the dogs barking, people screaming, the fires, the buildings collapsing. You're seeing all that, and you're like, man, look at all this chaos, look at all this madness, look at everything, look at this storm of confusion and things that are happening around me. and you don't know how to make sense of it. It's just too much. It's just too much to look at, right? So you're looking at it through your binoculars. Then I hand you my binoculars. And I nudge you and I say, hey, see that out there? Take a look at these, right? And then I give you a different pair of binoculars, right? I'm giving you a new lens to visualize what you're seeing, a new lens to visualize the battlefield and all of the things that are happening in front of you. The ability to get yourself or get other people to look at life and look at scenarios and look at situations through a different lens is incredibly important, right? In any sort of scenario, in any sort of context, the way in which we frame, the way in which we perceive an issue or a dilemma or some sort of challenge or some sort of adversity, that in and of itself, as I mentioned before, it constrains and it limits the different solutions that we think we have, or it constrains and limits how we make sense of things and what we can do to move forward, right? And again, that ability to get people to look through a different lens, that's actually a skill that I sort of maybe first developed or first started to see the importance of, not in the context of relationships and talking about relationships, actually in the context of personal training. I would do this sort of strategy and do this technique a lot with personal training clients, where I would have a client who often is very competitive, takes their training very seriously. You get a client who is very critical of themselves, very hard on themselves, and whenever they struggle with a certain new exercise or struggle with a new program, they can be overly critical, overly harsh on themselves to the point where they beat themselves up. And I would get clients who would be struggling and you know, they would be noticing that maybe this exercise or this workout is a little bit more challenging, and they would immediately kind of go negative with it, and they would say, "Oh, man, you know, I'm such a wimp. I'm such a weakling. You know, I can't even do this exercise. You know, look how weak I am. Look how just wimpy and not strong I am. I can't even do this." And I would realize that in that moment, I had a couple of seconds to kind of intervene and address their thought pattern before it started to kind of sink into their subconscious and essentially sabotage their entire rest of the workout or sabotage their performance with the rest of the workout, right? And when you're dealing with someone who's beating themselves up or they're critical about themselves, what I would realize is I couldn't just go direct and sort of approach the scenario head on. Meaning they couldn't just say, you know, look how weak I am. Oh, I'm struggling. I'm you know, such a wimp. I'm such a punk. I couldn't just go, no, you're not, right? Meaning I couldn't just sort of combat their frontal assault with my sort of frontal assault of saying, you know, no, you're not. You know, and not give them any sort of reasoning or not give them any explanation, right? Because then it becomes this back and forth of, yes, I am, no, you're not, yes, I am, no, you're not. And what I had to do is I had to, instead of battling them in that sort of lens, and instead of taking that lane and sort of dueling with them in that lane, what I had to do is kind of sidestep that perspective, and I had to instead give them an entirely new lens, a new way of framing their performance, right? So instead of saying, no, you're not, what I would say is, hey, you're struggling with this exercise now. Hey, remember a month ago when you couldn't even complete an entire workout, right? Remember when the first day we started, you were exhausted to the point where you were literally going to throw up, right? Every couple of minutes you had to sit down because you couldn't exercise and keep up at all. hey, this exercise that I'm having you do now, while maybe balancing on one foot and using, one side of your body. Remember a couple of weeks ago when I had you do that same exercise on both feet, sort of using both sides of your body and having more balance, and you struggled with that? Look, now you're able to do this, and I'm just asking you to focus on one side of your body, or I'm asking you to do something even more challenging, and look at you sort of working towards doing it. But weeks ago or months ago, remember when we first started, you couldn't even imagine that you'd be doing what you're doing right now, right? And not even 9 times out of 10, I'll say 29 times out of 30, the person would go, huh, well, yeah, I get, yeah, when you look at it from that perspective, yeah, I guess you have a good point. I'm not a weakling. I'm not weak. I'm not feeble. I'm not, all these negative things that I think I am. And they totally changed their outlook on how they were performing, and it allowed us to continue with the workout and productively move forward with the workout program. And looking at the situation, I didn't really do anything that profound, right? Nothing that I did was that creative or that ingenious, really. All that I did was, instead of having them shift on the here and now and I'm struggling with this, or instead of having them tackle what they think is in front of them and having them fixate on that, I changed their frame of reference, right? I changed the lens through which they looked at their performance. Instead of comparing themselves to where they think they should be, they're comparing themselves to where they started from, right? And they saw that huge gap there, and were able to celebrate that, and were able to think positively about themselves because of that, right? Taking that same reference, taking that same philosophy, that's how I try to help people work through unhealthy relationships, abusive relationships, maybe help them overcome or heal from a previous unhealthy relationship that they used to be in. By changing how someone frames the problem, by changing the lens through which they are looking at what's in front of them, you change how they go about solving the problem, right? How they go about trying to resolve it or overcome it. And this could be in the realm of unhealthy relationships with people, or it could be, you can even apply this to unhealthy relationships with things, right? You can talk about this in the context of addictions, right? Whether it's a substance addiction, whether you're dealing with drugs or alcohol. I've never been in that situation myself. I can't even say that personally, I know of anyone who I knew, was struggling with an addiction, whether it's drugs or alcohol or smoking or something like that. Well, actually, smoking, I will say I do know people who struggle with that, but like other drugs or things like alcohol or substances where someone has had to go to like rehab or things like that, I've never dealt personally with that kind of experience. And that's not my line of work, right? That's not my profession. That's not what I went to school for. I don't have certifications or licensing in that realm of helping people end unhealthy relationships with things or helping people break addictions. But if I were to go into that line of work, if that was something that I sought out to do, I know how I would approach the situation, and maybe how it would be different from the traditional way of helping end unhealthy relationships with drugs, or helping end unhealthy relationships with things, right? I wouldn't approach it from the standpoint of, getting the person to see how bad alcohol is and how destructive it can be for the health and all the negative impacts. I wouldn't hold up a diagram of the person's liver and say, if you continue to drink, this is what your life is going to be like. I wouldn't do all of the the conventional things that we usually think of when we're trying to get someone to address their unhealthy relationship with a thing. What I would do is take a different approach and say, okay, you probably are already aware that this thing is harmful. You're probably already aware that this thing is destructive, that it will lead to pain and suffering, right? Just like an unhealthy relationship, you're probably already aware that you're feeling sad, you're feeling depressed, that you're feeling abused, that you're feeling taken for granted, that you're feeling exploited or manipulated or insulted, humiliated, neglected, abandoned. You're probably aware of all of the ways in which this person or this relationship is hurting you. let's hold that, right? We can come back to that. Let's put that on the shelf for a second. Let's look at why you are drawn to that relationship, right? Let's look at why you're drawn to that thing. Instead of focusing and moralizing why it's bad for you and why you should stop doing it, let's look at why you're drawn to it, right? Let's look at what need is it fulfilling for you? What desire is it fulfilling for you, right? Let's look at what context or what scenario do you start to crave alcohol, or what context, what scenario do you start to think about this person or miss being in a relationship with this person? Let's look at those things instead of a lot of the times what you already know, which is why these things are bad for you or why it's negative for you. Let's ask ourselves, by indulging in that drug or that substance, or by indulging in that relationship, what is it that you are chasing, right? What is it that you are running towards? Or maybe look at from the standpoint of what is it that you are running from, right? So if you said, well, I struggle with alcohol abuse, I struggle with alcohol addiction, I'm an alcoholic, but then I got you to explore the situations and the context in which you resort to alcohol, right? If I got you to think about, okay, what sorts of things come to mind that create this urge for me to drink? What are the things that I'm running towards or running from? And I got you to think, okay, well, maybe, I'm realizing that I don't have the best relationship with my parents, right? Why don't I have the best relationship with my parents? Well, maybe I don't have the best relationship with my parents because I don't have a good job, or I don't have a profession that they approve of or that they think highly of. And all of my other friends and family they have these brilliant jobs and these brilliant careers and they're doing things in life, but I don't really have much to show for it. I don't really have anything to make my family and my friends and my loved ones proud. So I try to escape that by drinking, or I try to escape that by resorting to drugs, right? Now we're actually addressing, the fundamental thing that's causing you to resort to that, instead of looking at it just in the context of a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction. We're looking at what is the underlying cause, right? What is it that you are using the drug to kind of medicate, or what is it that you are using the alcohol to escape from? And by addressing that, could we then indirectly address the alcohol abuse or the drug abuse, right? If instead of focusing so much on not going out to clubs and not going out to parties and not having drugs and alcohol around you, which is certainly an important thing, what if I got you to focus on building a career or having a job that was meaningful to you, that gave you that sense of satisfaction and fulfillment, right? What if I got you to focus on having a career that maybe was conducive to having proud, exciting relationships with your friends and your family, a sense of belonging, a sense of achievement, something that you felt proud of at the end of the night, something that when you laid your head on that pillow, you felt good about, and it wasn't just a job that was kind of making ends meet or helping you pay the bills, but something that really made you feel fulfilled, something that gave you purpose and gave you a sense of ambition, something to work towards, right? Could we address, by doing that, could we then address the alcohol or the drug abuse? I think more times than not we could, right? If we address the underlying thing that led you to escape or led you to try to avoid your problems and avoid the things that you're struggling with in life through drugs or alcohol, could we address those things in order to address the addiction? In other words, look at the addiction or the unhealthy relationship with something, look at it as a side effect of some other issue or some other trauma or some other conflict, right? Don't focus so much on it as the problem. Look at it as a side effect of maybe something underlying that is leading towards trying to escape through, like I said, drugs or alcohol. Now, from that sort of in-depth, extensive sort of analysis and approach towards addressing that issue, you would think that I read books about drug and alcohol abuse, or that's my line of work or that's my field of study, when in reality it's not. Again, it's not my area of focus with my content. It's not something that I think a lot about. It's not something that personally I've dealt with, nor is it something that I have close family members or friends who have dealt with, at least to my knowledge. But that being said, outside of drugs, alcohol, those kinds of addictions, I do know what it feels like to be addicted to a person. I do know what it feels like to have an unhealthy relationship with an individual, right? I do know what it feels like to have a emotional dependence upon a person, despite contact with that person, despite a relationship with that person leading to pain and suffering and disappointment, frustration, confusion, right? I do know what it feels like to have that push-pull sort of tension with a person and continue to want a person, continue to want contact with a person, despite feeling the negative emotions that come on the back end of that relationship, that come on the back end of contact with that individual. I do know that it's very challenging and, in my opinion, in some situations, impossible to address a behavior, to address actions without addressing and analyzing and dissecting and understanding the psychology behind that behavior, right? The psychology behind those actions. So, with that being said, if there's one take-home message or one framework that I would encourage people to apply when it comes to unhealthy relationships, when it comes to abusive relationships, it's at times, don't focus on the mess and the storm and the whirlwind that's in front of you, right? Don't focus on the behavior and the actions of the other person. Don't focus on what they are doing and how to solve that puzzle and how to fix them and how to change them and how to get them to treat you better and how to adopt better strategies and better ways of navigating the relationship, right? Don't always look at the problem through that lens. Sometimes it's helpful to look at the problem through the lens of addressing your relationship with that behavior, right? Addressing how you perceive that behavior. Instead of that, look at things through the lens of addressing your relationship with that individual, right? Addressing your relationship with that behavior, right? Looking at my own life, the amount of time, the number of months I spent trying to figure out how to get this person to change and how to get them to respond to me differently or how to get them to treat me better. When instead, I think that time could have been spent much more efficiently focusing on my relationship with their behavior, focusing on my relationship with how they're treating me, right? Focusing on my perception of their behavior, focusing on analyzing how I was responding, how I, not them, focusing on how I was responding to that behavior, and even focusing on why I was drawn to that behavior, right? Why am I still in this relationship? Why am I still trying to be a detective and trying to figure out the right way, the right way to do things? Why am I trying to figure out the right way to appease this person and make them happy and make them feel good and make them treat me better? Why do I have this need to try to figure things out, right? Why am I drawn towards that? What need or desire, directly or indirectly, is that fulfilling for me? In order to do that, right, in order to assess that relationship that you have with them, there's a couple things that I think are very important for you to be able to do. One is you have to be humble, right? You have to be willing to accept a certain level of accountability and responsibility in the relationship that you're in. And somewhat similarly and related to that is you cannot moralize by way of trying to protect your own sort of intelligence or protect your own sort of moral virtue in a sense. That sounds kind of confusing. What do I mean by that? Meaning you can't look at a situation or look at an unhealthy relationship and go, well, me, I'm such a great person. I'm so intelligent. I'm so bright and brilliant. I'm so understanding and I have such a grasp of the world. As perfect as I am, I would never be drawn or attracted to someone who's abusive or who mistreats me or who takes me for granted, or add whatever verb you want to put in there. I would never, choose or willingly subject myself to that kind of behavior. What you're doing in that situation is you're moralizing, right? You're making a moral judgment of your behavior and of your actions, or what you think you would do or what you think you wouldn't do in different situations, right? You can't do that. You have to be brutally honest and say, okay, what is it, yes, I'm sad, I'm upset, I'm frustrated, I'm bewildered, I'm confused, but there is something that is keeping me in contact with this person, right? There is something that is drawing me to them. That's a very difficult sort of mental connection to make and mental sort of path to take, because it suggests at some level that you play a role in the relationship that you're in. It suggests, as I mentioned before, a certain level of culpability. It suggests a certain responsibility and accountability that I am part of this system, right? I am of these two pillars that are keeping this system up. I am one of them, right? I have in some way chosen to be in a relationship with this person. I have chosen, for whatever reason, to tolerate this kind of behavior up until this point. I think a crucial part of healing is just getting over that truth, right? Is just accepting that truth. I don't think you can heal or move forward from an unhealthy relationship, from an abusive relationship, if all of your attention and all of your time and all of your mental focus is directed outward, right? Is directed externally and is directed just at that person, right? What they're doing, what they're saying, how they're behaving. I think in order to heal, in order to move forward, some of that attention has to be directed inward. Some of it has to be why am I here? How did I get here? Right? What are the steps that brought me towards this relationship? What role am I playing in this system? I don't think you can overcome an unhealthy relationship with someone or something if all of your attention and all of your focus and all of your mental energy is directed outward, right? I think at some point you have to do some reflecting and sort of directing your attention internally and saying, okay, what is it about this thing that is allowing me to escape or achieve something? What is it that I'm able to gain, or what is it that's drawing me to this thing and is benefiting me either directly or indirectly? Then I think from that point you can accurately assess what is it that's drawing me to this person. Perhaps how am I benefiting from this relationship, or what am I gaining from this relationship directly or indirectly? And then transitioning to a point of, okay, now that I know what that is, are there healthier sources through which I can achieve those same ends? Are there healthier relationships and healthier things I could be doing with my time that allow me to achieve those same things, but that don't bring the abuse, the pain, the suffering, and the mistreatment? So, in wrapping things up, hope you all got some value from this video. Hope you all got some good perspective, maybe some ideas, and just a new way of looking at unhealthy relationships and how to overcome them. So if you did enjoy the video, click that thumbs up button. Let us know that you liked it. Leave a comment down below. Share your thoughts, feedback, opinions, stories, perspectives, whatever it is that you want to share. And definitely subscribe to the channel. That way you'll be the very first to know when we come out with new content each and every week. And last but not least, let us know what you think about the Lost and Found Dating Channel merch, and whether you yourself would like to get your hands on some of this merch as well. So thank you for joining us once again. Until next time, catch you later. Peace.